Hey everyone. We're going to continue our study on the Synoptic Gospels that we've been doing for several months. Of course, this is our first online Bible study since we had to stop due to the coronavirus spread. I didn't want us just to keep not having our Bible study, so I'm going to go back to this format. I used to teach online study several years ago before I got married and had Jonathan, so I decided to try this format again. So we're going to do it online. We may try doing some live videos at some point, but right now I just figured I would do a recording and then we can all talk about if there's a time that works for live or if this is better just to have an online option. Now, Jonathan is with us today. Say hi, Jonathan. Hey, okay. So, he is with me and I apologize for any distraction, but he's a part of this, so we gotta do that. Now, for everyone who's not been in our Korean Bible study, if you're watching maybe in America or someone else from once I post this online, we've been doing a study of the Synoptic Gospels for several months, looking at the way that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John layer on top of each other to build the entire story of Jesus's life. And some things are only in one book, some things are in all four. Most things are in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John has a lot less of the narrative that we've been looking at so far. It's been really interesting and fun, I think, to study this. We've been using an outline from the BYU studies online of the Synoptic Four Gospels. Everyone who's in the Bible study, I've given you this link. If any of you are watching online and want to have this document, please let me know. It's simply a chart that shows how the stories are matching, like if it's in Matthew 5 and then it's in Mark 2 or something like that. So it's simply a list of the stories. So that all said, for everyone who's already in the study, you know what's going on. So just catching up the rest of anyone who might be watching. So in our last lesson, which was back in February, we are looking today at point number 45. So our last one, we did the higher law on divorce and we did swear not at all. And so today is the higher law on retaliation. So if you look at Matthew chapter 5, verses 43 to 48, we will see this passage. So Matthew chapter 5, verse 43. Oh, sorry. That's love your enemies. My husband just came to tell me that I'm being too loud. He is broadcasting his online class live in the other room, and so I need to tone it down so I don't interrupt the English classes that are going on the porch. Oh, what a time we're living in, right? Okay, so my bad. That's Matthew 5, verse 38. All right, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. Okay, now remember, this is coming from the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus has went through all of the different principles of the kingdom, we could say. Like, how do we handle anger as a Christian? How do we handle lust? What about divorce? What about making oaths? What about dealing with all these different social and cultural aspects of interactions as a Christian, plus our internal issues like anger and lust? So Jesus is going through internal and external ways that being a Christian, having a kingdom mindset, should change us. Now, with that in mind, that he is giving us a heavenly perspective on an earthly reality, and that he's wanting to shape our culture to be molded into the mind of Christ rather than in our humanity. Then when we look at this concept of retaliation, of getting back with others, then we're seeing him first establish the cultural principles that were normal. You've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Now, in the Levitical law, there was this principle of equal payback for something that was done against a person. And so Jesus is saying, all right, this has been the cultural norm. But now I say to you, don't resist the one who's evil. If anyone slaps you on one cheek, let him slap on you on the other. If anyone wants to sue you to take your clothes, a payback of a debt or something like a normal sue, and the payment would be like just a cloak, let him also have your cloak, your tunic and your cloak. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, then go 2. Now, there's lots of cultural things that he is dealing with there. Like, for example, on the 1 mile to 2. In that time, the Roman soldiers could make someone carry their load, their burdens, their weapons, or whatever they were dealing with. And if they said, carry it, they could make someone go for 1 mile. And then they couldn't force someone to go longer than that. They had to find a new person. And so since that was a cultural thing that people were experiencing, this subjection to authority that made them bear a burden, literally, for 1 mile, Jesus is saying go 2. Now, what is that? What is the point of that? This, if someone wants to take something from you, give them more. If someone wants to punish you in one way, like don't resist. Like what is he really dealing with, the cultural thing? Well, let's look back. What is he correcting? He's correcting the cultural aspect. You've heard it said an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Why does he want us to not see the world from that cultural perspective? Before we talk anymore about it, I don't want to miss reading the cross lessons. You want to come? Here you go. So that was the Matthew version of that. But over in Luke chapter 6. Luke chapter 6, verse 27. We see the same sermon written out here. It's verses 27 to 36. So let's just read that really quick, and then we will evaluate. I'm sorry, I keep dropping on the wrong one. 29 to 30. Chapter 6, verse 29 and 30. Why can I not find this? Where's verse 29? There it is. Okay. To the one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And for one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who begs from you, and from one who takes away your goods, do not demand them back. And as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. Now he adds that do to others as you would have them do to you aspect that we quote so much. But also the verse before that on verse 27, but I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. Now, have a cup? We love our cups. Okay, please. Yes. Okay. So, when we look at how Jesus is, one, in the Matthew recording, correcting a cultural aspect of eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, and then adding and changing or upgrading that mentality to be more than just equal payback. He's saying pray for those who abuse you. Pray for those who would use you. Pray for those who would curse you. Give to anyone who beg from you. If anyone wants something from you, give it to them. Do unto others as you would have them do to you. Now, with that Luke passage tucked in around the Matthew passage, and we get the more of the full statement that Jesus was making that day. He's talking to a group of people who believe in equal punishment. So if you injured me and my eye was cut out, I could legally and presumably morally walk up to you and take your eye out. Now, Jesus is saying, okay, let's rise above that. Instead of equaling the evil, equaling the pain, equaling the shame, equaling the problem, let's rise above it and pray for them. Let's show a higher calling, a bigger perspective, a more heavenly mind. So Jesus models this in everything he does. When we look at the cross and how Jesus died on the cross, taking our sins for us, we sinned against him. Instead of punishing us for that sin, he paid for it. And he's telling us, now if someone sins against you, pray for them. If they ask you for something, give it to them. Just like he does for us. Now, that's a kingdom mindset. So, as a Christian, do you find yourself being more like these cultural Jews who wanted to pay back every pain that was given to them? They're going to get even. They're going to get back. They're going to make sure that you suffer the same amount that they suffered. Is that your mentality? Or are you saying that you are a follower of Christ? That you are seeing the world from his perspective? That you are living with his mind, literally? And in that process, don't eat the curtain. In that process of having the mind of Christ, are you really willing to say, if you hurt me, I'm going to pray for you. If you steal from me, I'm going to give you what you actually need. If you demand I do something, I'll do more. Now, normally the first response that I get in this kind of teaching is, well, people will abuse you. If you actually live this way, people will abuse you. Now, that is a valid point, except that Jesus says that it's okay if people abuse us. Now, hear me out. He says that our reward is great in heaven if people abuse us or spitefully use us. He says that nothing is missed by the Father. He says that our treasure in heaven is much greater reward for our kindness, our tolerance, our love towards our enemy than what we get back by demanding vengeance, equal punishment, fairness, all of that worldly perspective and cultural mind that demands that kind of equal fairness is not biblical. So that's difficult because we want to be treated equally. We want to be treated fairly. We want to demand our rights as we think we have politically. Throughout history, especially for any Americans who are watching, throughout history, America has been very much built on a mentality that no one can mistreat me. It's my right to be given what I want. I should always get my dreams. I should live the American dream. I should always get my privileges. I should always be given my rights. That's a great thing. There's nothing wrong with a government system that ensures equality and justice. That's what government is for. It should do that. I'm not saying that's bad. But what I am saying is it can create a mentality spiritually as well that everything has to be fair and equal. That no one can ever mistreat me and get by with it. That nothing bad should ever happen to me because I don't want it to happen to me. And that somehow God is not fair when bad things happen. And we realize that, number one, fairness is a cultural perspective. It's not a spiritual perspective. God doesn't have to be fair. And when we look and interpret Scripture from a cultural perspective, we're going to have problems. And number two, when we realize that Jesus's culture, Jesus's perspective is love your enemy. Pray for them when they abuse you. Give them more than they ask for. Live higher than your culture. That's what he means. Come out from among them and be separate. Come out from your culture. Be different. Don't just do the same thing. Right? Yeah. So, when we realize that, when we realize the value that God places on love over equal treatment, that God places on sacrifice over fairness, that God doesn't want us to value our things more than showing his love. So if someone comes to me and demands I give them something and I say, no, that's mine. I'm not going to give that to you. I don't want to give that to you. It's not fair. Why should I give it to you? Jesus is saying, no. Love the person more than your stuff. Give them what they need. If someone asks for it, give it. If someone takes it, give them more. There's a reason they're taking it. There's something wrong with them. They need Jesus. So in that, like, cultural perspective and in that reality that God cares more for the human, even in their sin, than for our stuff or our injustice or our difficulty. That he wants us to love and be kind and be above treating someone equally. Now, what I mean by that is, like, if God says that he wants you to help someone, we do it. What if a person says they want help? Do you do it? A lot of times I say, well, let me pray about it and see what God wants. Does God really want me to give my clothes to that person, give my money to that person, give my time to that person? That person hates me. That person's been unkind to me. That person's my enemy. That person's a different race or a different culture or a different language group or whatever. Or that boss has been unkind to me, or, you know, like whatever we're dealing with that makes us think it's okay not to do it. Like we justify it and say that person doesn't deserve my kindness. And Jesus says, love your enemy. Give to those who ask. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Which means they're not treating you right, and you're showing them how to treat. You are modeling behavior. You are rising above the culture. Now, unless we do this, we are not living with the mind of Christ. And I think of all the different commandments of Christ, this one's the one that is easiest to ignore, maybe. Like we all know that murder is bad. So when Jesus is like, don't murder, and when you're angry and you think it's okay to hate someone, that's as bad as murder. It comes from the same place in your heart. Like he's, and we go, okay, I know anger's bad, I get it, you know. But on this one, we're like, oftentimes from that cultural perspective, when Jesus says, give people your stuff if they need it, you're like, no, I'm not going to give them my stuff. Or if they hit you, don't defend yourself. Man, I tell you, that one's a hard one, especially for the Americans watching. We're all about fight back, man. Shoot them if you want, you know? Like, when Jesus is saying that that's not okay, how do you respond to that? Like, how do you listen to this voice of Christ telling you to behave this way? Do you just ignore it? Do you say, oh, that doesn't really mean that for me? Or do we stop and say, that is literally what Jesus is saying. How am I going to respond to it? How am I going to evaluate my life and my behavior and my interactions with others in a way that is showing value and respect to Jesus? Or is it just showing value and respect to your rights, to your possessions, to your emotions? Like, I don't want to feel that way, so I'm going to hurt someone because they made me feel that way, or I'm going to get angry back, or I'm going to be mean back, or I'm going to cuss them back. They did it first. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that the other person did it first. That doesn't give us the justice to do it too. So that's the point. Like, it is really significant that we look at what Christ is saying and say, how much in my life am I permitting myself to sin because I think it's okay? I think I have the right to do it. I think the other person started it. I think it's not necessary. I think I have the right to protect my stuff. You know, like, how many times are we saying, I'm going to take that suffering, I'm going to take that abuse, I'm going to take that attitude in order to show Christ and let him defend me and let him be my defense, my strong tower, my everything. Like that whole reality that I'm supposed to submit to God and let God be the one who deals with evil while I show love. If you don't think God's going to defend you, if you don't think God's going to protect you, if you don't think God can stand up for you, if you don't think it's worth waiting for the treasure in heaven to deal with this perspective here, like those are all reasons that people ignore this teaching. So you have to determine, why am I ignoring it? If you are, why do I not live with this kingdom perspective? And what needs to change in my heart, in my faith, in my trust of God, to make me able to say, if they ask for one piece of clothing, I'll give them two. If they abuse me, I will not fight back. If they try to take me to court, I'm going to settle with more than they're asking. It is a mentality of life that Jesus models and lives and tells us to live also, because we're praying for our enemies, we're loving them, we're taking care of them, even if they don't deserve it. Because deserving has nothing to do with the gospel. Jesus forgives us, and Jesus pays our price of our sin, and he absorbs our abuse and our shame and our guilt that we give him every day because of his love for us. And he says, I pray for you. I died for you. And he expects no less of us in our interaction with each other. So I want to hear your thoughts, your questions, your ideas. Ladies here in Korea from my Bible study, please send me questions on our chat. Let me know your responses, your thoughts, and your ideas that you get from this on our chat. And anyone who's watching internationally, you can send me a message on Facebook or however we normally communicate. So I just want us all to consider today, am I living with this kingdom mindset in my interactions with other people, or is my culture and my own mind and my own sinful heart controlling how I interact with others? All right, let's talk about it. Thanks, guys.